I want to help somebody. I cannot afford to be the Christian. Lord, that's my request. Please help me to help somebody.
The Grandville Cooperative Credit Union, the credit union of Grandville, takes you where you want to be. Feel secure with the Credit Union of Grandville, taking care of all your financial needs, including savings, loans, mortgages, and sound financial advice. Serving you with branches on Jubilee Street in Grenville, Lucas Street in St. George's, and coming soon, our Grandstand sub-office. Call us on 442-8602 or visit one of our offices. With Grenville Cooperative Credit Union, your financial security is guaranteed.
Who wants to save 30%? Everybody! Now more than ever, Flow understands the need to make your dollar stretch. Our new bundles can help you save 30% off your current bill. Plus, get a free speed upgrade on your in-home internet. Simply add your mobile to your current home services account and save 30%. It's easy. Sign up now and save. All on the most reliable fixed and mobile network on island. Visit a Flow store or call us at 1-800-804-2994 for more information. Flow, it only gets better. Terms and conditions apply.
The Housing Authority offers products that people can choose from, products that people can access. And I think anyone looking to build, just call the Housing Authority of Grenada. The service was superb. Every step of the way, they collaborated with the owner, they collaborated with the builder. The builder himself was really good. For what I've seen them do, I have to say that from buildings they have done in the past to where they are now, they have come up to speed with modern trends, modern designs, and I think I will advise anybody.
The Ministry of Agriculture and Lands, Fisheries and Cooperatives, in collaboration with the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, invites you to the 2022 World Food Day activity at the Carnage Plaza in St. George's. This year's World Food Day activity will be celebrated under the theme, Leave No One Behind. The activities begin with an opening ceremony from 10 a.m., followed by exhibitions and a farmers market. Remember, World Food Day 2022, October 21st, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. For more information, please contact the Ministry of Agriculture and Lands on 440-2708.
Say the business bad, there are other people's business at once. They complaining, things are hard, other people who are harder than hard.
All right, a pleasant good morning. It's always a pleasure to be here on Real FM. I'm your host, Cooperative Dupre. I know you kind of get used to me by now. I'm here usually on Thursdays, and this week is no exception. It's always a pleasure to be here at Real FM. Right, so this morning we got a very interesting program. Right, remember last week while I was here, we did indicate that we was going to focus on the children, because October month is Youth Month, is Child's Month, and also Month of the Elderly, right? We had a program last week on care and protection of the elderly, myself and my colleague, Ms. Mitchell, and it was very much interesting program, right? And this week, we're going to speak about the Juvenile Justice Program. And I just want to introduce our guests this morning, and one of our guests is Miss St. John, and she's a probation officer. And we have been working with her for a pretty while. She's been as an officer, very much dedicated, and I've been working really hard with our young persons and so on. So it's always a pleasure to have her here. And then we have Miss Ford, very lovely Miss Ford, Valerie Ford, who is also a probation officer. And my colleague, right here to my right, Miss Mitchell. So, you know, I'm used with Miss Mitchell. So this morning is just the attention going to be with Miss Ford and Miss St. John. And we have decided that we're going to have a program this morning on the juvenile justice system. A lot of times, and a lot of persons in our community, you know, they may not be aware of the procedure, the process, that specific act that is designed really to facilitate how the police and other relevant entity deal with young persons. And we just want to clear up, you know, to create a better understanding on that act and, you know, how we relate to it, the responsibility, the roles of the police, the roles of probation, you know, what are the rights of juveniles when they're in custody, and how we go about dealing with juvenile as a whole. Right? There's a lot of information in it, and I know that time may not necessarily permit us to speak about everything that we like to, so let me don't take too much of your time. Let me just get into it. So, right, so I'll start off with Ms. Ford. So maybe a general overview about, if you want to speak about the Act, the Juvenile Justice Act, what it is, what it's about, and, you know, can you tell us about it, the Juvenile Justice Act?
Good morning. So we'll be interchanging as much as possible, working together here this morning. So good morning, everyone. So many people would have heard about the Juvenile Justice Act 2012. It's an act that is there to protect the child. It's a child-friendly act, and it's also to protect the child and anything in terms of what the child is going through as an offender. All right. It's also an act where the magistrate or the judge is looking at the concerns of the child as an individual. So you're taking them away from the formal court system and putting them in a place where they can be free to express themselves and not feel that they're condoned in any way, because they're still children. And the act would speak to children from the age of 12 to 18. And that's really the introductory purpose of the Juvenile Justice Act, which is a law that's been passed for children, you know, to enable them to be rehabilitated in the right way.
All right, that's very interesting. But I know before the act, you know, how we dealt with young persons was quite different. And someone may ask, well, you know, was there a need to have a new act, or why is it that we have a new, how we introduced a Juvenile Justice Act? What was wrong with what was happening before? So maybe if you want to clarify, because, you know, we want to justify the reason, and I'm in 100% support of the Juvenile Justice Act, because I think so a lot of times we look at children as sometimes through the mirror of what, you know, offense they commit, and we try to take away, because they would have done something, we take away from them that the fact that they're a child and, you know, this is a criminal and so on. And before, a lot of things was done different. The Juvenile Justice Act also in it have a lot that, you know, in terms of the guidelines, it's not new, right? It was taken from what was happening in the past. But generally, from your opinion, or maybe a professional opinion, why do you think that there was a need to actually introduce the act, or what was happening before and what is different now under the Juvenile Justice Act?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Right, so the act, prior to the act coming into place, right, magistrates would have had, it was up to their discretion to deal with the children how, I guess, they saw fit, or how best, in the best way that they thought at the time, right? There wasn't any, the act is formal. So prior to that, there wasn't any formal way of dealing with juveniles. If they come into the system, you worked with basically what you had. If there was somebody to speak on their behalf, they would, but outside of that, there wasn't anything formal set in place, right? And so what we know now, right, from research and so forth, because that comes into play in why we have the act and why there's something specific for juveniles. We know that the age of, obviously we start at 12 for age of criminal responsibility, but we do know that persons, the brain development, right? Persons do not, the brain development doesn't, is not completed until the age of 24, 25, right? So we have to think about, okay, how juveniles are committing offenses, but they don't always understand, right? Because the brain is not fully developed, the frontal lobe of the brain is not fully developed, and that determines how a child would act, right? If they have any impulse control, if they have any inhibitions. And so if they don't have those things, then we understand, okay, we have to treat them differently than we would treat an adult, right? So the act came into play now post-charge, right? The Juvenile Justice Act is actually a post-charge act, right? Okay. So after the child has committed the offense and would be apprehended by the police, the act comes into play. And so that is the genesis, basically, of why we are doing things now to protect the interests of the child, because that's the basis of the act, right? To protect the interests of the children.
All right, it was very interesting with that. And as I mentioned earlier on, it all have to do with the specific interests of the children. And I always say that it's easy to criticize or maybe to come down on someone when they do something, but sometimes we don't even understand it or so on. Because I know initially when the act was just introduced, there was a lot of I heard statements from different persons within the community. Someone like, well, now that this act, it seems like, allowing young people to do what they want because they're not going in jail, nobody not locking them up and all this kind of thing. And, any little boy or any little girl or hit me is what I'm, this kind of thing. They got to do something to them, because, they do not think that they have been held accountable for the action. It's like a tap on the shoulder, and and they have so much young persons that is doing so much things, that is committing so much crimes, and there are a lot of these sentiments have been shared. Ms. Ford, do you agree with those sentiments, or you think that maybe persons who have this sentiment, maybe they have a misguided approach, or a lack of understanding of what they intend to accomplish?
I mean, I do understand the sentiment from the public. I do understand that we're living in a different era now than, maybe 20 years ago, how children would be involved in different things and offenses. And we've evolved from, as I said, maybe 20 years ago to what's happening now with young people. So things that would have affected young people and the other social ills and other issues that young people faced 20 years ago is different now from what my mother or older members of the family would have faced then to what they're facing now is very different. So I understand the concerns from the public, but also the act is there to protect, the children in terms of the concerns that the children are facing now. The court system is a child-friendly system, right? So you're going to get professionals and you're going to get, multi-agencies that understand the workings of the mind, understand the attitudes, the behaviors, all the cognitive, issues that children face. And so it's better to have them in a separate court system where we can address those issues. We can do the necessary interventions, as needed. Once they come to the court system, once they come into conflict with the law, a child comes into conflict with the law, those interventions may have already failed. So when they come into the court system, we are there to, give them a professional approach. It's not just professionalism in terms of education, it's also experience, what persons would have within the court system, within the judicial system to work with these children. And they're all our children. It's a holistic approach. We all have children. We all know a child. We all have a cousin or a brother or a sister. So we know children. So it's not just about, a job, it's a passion. Right. But we involve ourselves. We do the necessary interventions, whether it's in the schools, whether it's in the home. I mean, sometimes you may get a parent and a child coming to see you at your home because they know of you in the community. And what can you help? How can you help me? So parents understand that they need help. Mm. Parents maybe just don't know where to go for the help. But they understand there's a problem. By the time the child comes into conflict with the law, the parent is under no false impression that there's nothing going on. They know there's some issues going on, but maybe those issues have been left, and then it's at that point when the intervention is really needed. It's a critical stage when the child enters the court system. So I understand, and I'm a parent myself, so I do understand that it can affect persons if they have the wrong perceptions and maybe things of before or how things were done before. But we're moving ahead, we're forging ahead in this season, and we really, really want everybody to be involved. So it's a kind of cultural, multi-dimensional, multi-environmental, all those factors, professionals, everybody coming to the table and really wanting our children to succeed and not to fail, So when you hear some of these things that are happening, we are addressing, we're in the background, not so much in the forefront as the police, who do an amazing job. Where probation officers are more in the background, excuse me, in their little offices in the parishes and going out into the communities and meeting people, or we're in the court system. So we are a face, but not as much as the police, not as recognized as the police. So persons normally think we're social workers, and that is part of the portfolio, but we are probation officers.
And
we have a role to play.
We quite understand your role, because yes, you may not be at the forefront as maybe the police officer are, but you do play a very important role in the whole process, because the police by ourselves, we cannot really do it, right? Process where you have probation is relatively recent, and I know the challenges that we have as police officer when sometimes we have to act as probation officers, we have to act as counselors, we have to act as social workers, and so on. And in some instances, it's very much tiring. So to really have those responsibilities, delegated to different institutions, it really helped the process a lot. And I always say I really do commend that initiative to take that part. I think in a lot of other facets of our community, we need to have this form of a responsibility for different sectors, right? So as we move on, I just want to clear up if whichever one of you may want to speak in relation to that, the process that or the court process that the juvenile and maybe an adult accused go through. How is it differ? Not the Juvenile Justice Act, where from the time a child commits an offense to the time it goes to court, when compared to an adult, how is it differ?
So from the time a child is apprehended, right? So that the police would come in there, and so from the time the child is apprehended, according to the law, the police is responsible for informing. They have to inform probation within 24 hours of the child being in their custody, right? So once the police apprehends that child comes to the whichever respective police station. The police is responsible for informing that child's parent, or guardian, or a guardian, right? A specified guardian. So it can be an older cousin, an aunt, even someone from the school, a social worker, right? But someone has to be there with that child before the police would speak to them about anything, question them about any offense, alleged offense that has been committed, right? So that is very important. So that differs obviously with an adult, because with an adult, okay, you can speak up for yourself, you can answer. Actually, well, at least with an adult, they still have the option of having a lawyer present, right? Yes, and a child has that same right. So they can have the parent or guardian available with them, but they can also have a lawyer, right? Once moving on from there, once a statement is taken from the child in the presence of the parent and probation is informed, then we schedule what is called an assessment, right? A date for an assessment. And so an assessment is basically meeting with the child and the parent and having conversations. So we do a comprehensive report. We look into the child's background, ask them questions about the offense, ask them questions about their family life, because the child comes in as an individual, right? We don't treat each child the same because their circumstances might be different, right? And so one of the first things that we have to, when we meet with that child for an assessment, one of the first things that we do is verify whether the child has accepted responsibility for the offense, right? And so an acceptance of responsibility is similar to when a person, an adult, comes and say, okay, yes, I'm guilty of this offense. Yes, I committed this offense, right? So we just child-friendly terms, we would ask, do you accept responsibility for this offense? All right, and then if the child accepts responsibility for the offense, then that determines the direction in which the matter would go before the court, right? So if a child accepts responsibility and says, yes, Mr. and John, yes, I committed the offense, yes, I broke into Mr. Tom or Mr. Harry's house, then we do what is called diversion, right? And so when the matter comes before the court, we would produce a report to the court and say, okay, the child has accepted responsibility for the offense. We have spoken with the child. gain some knowledge about the child's background, the parents' background, any sort of information that would help us work with that child, right? Have the proper intervention for the child. So if it's the child is not going to school, if the child needs counseling, if the child needs to do some community service or compensation. So we establish all that information prior to going to court.
Okay.
And when we go to court, it's what's called an initial inquiry, right? So that is similar to a first attendance at court for an adult. So adult has the first hearing at court, a child has an initial inquiry, but it's basically the same thing. When the child comes to court, then and that's one of the differences between children and adults. Children, they stay out of the dock, right? So an adult might go into the dock in court, a child stays out. And so they stand with the parents outside of the dock, because we know that we treat children differently. We don't have a child court, but we do have a day, what is called the juvenile day, for our juvenile and family day, where that's the day they come to court, right? So adults might come to court any day that they put the matter on, but we have specific days for juvenile in each parish, right? So I'm the probation officer in St. John's and St. Mark's. So in St. John's, obviously the last juvenile day, the juvenile day is the last Tuesday or Wednesday of the month. And in St. Mark, it's the last Monday of the month. Okay. All right. So back to in court, once the child is at court, we present our report to the court, right? And so the magistrate would have an idea, have that report, and would use that to guide the approach to the child, right? And most of the time they endorse the recommendations of the probation officer. They will speak to the child, ensure that, okay, what was written by the probation officer is in the same sentiments of the child, of the parents, and they are in agreement to follow whatever interventions or orders the court issue. Right, so basically. Okay.
All right. I think yes. I'm sure that anyone listening will get clear understanding. And say you don't speak too well, but I think you're doing a pretty good job there this morning. As we move on, you mentioned if a child take responsibility and we go into the diversion and so on. So what if there's a situation where that child does not take responsibilities for his action? And we know that there are a lot of children, that they have the tendency, to deny, even though there are clear evidence that they would have committed an offense, or they do not show any remorse, anything such as such. So, what would be the process if we as a probation officer, that is the situation that you're faced with that particular child?
So I will allow Ms. Ford to.
Yes, Ms. Ford.
Right?
Yes,
but I do want to say that as probation officers, a lot of the children or the parents, they don't know the law well, right? So they don't know the language. A lot of them don't understand the language of the law, right? Yeah. And so it's our responsibility to. Definitely. You might say, okay, Sam said you assaulted him. And the child might say, Miss, I didn't assault him. But pushing, spitting, or an attempt to, right, is still an offense. And so it's our responsibility to explain that in simple terms for the child and his parents, so they understand. So, because when you explain it to them, now they say, oh, yes, Miss, I did it. And then so you have to explain to them, well, yes, that's still considered an assault or so forth. Right. So, like I said, it's our responsibility to ensure that they understand the language of
exactly. And I understand that quite well, and not because it's not only probation, even the police. From the time we have a child in custody, we need to explain to them the reason why they're in custody and what the process is going to be and everything. So I'm quite aware of that. But notwithstanding all that is being done, so we know that despite every effort to get them to understand what is it that they have done and guiding them through the process, we still have situation. Yeah, so Ms. Ford?
I mean, that's part of the reason for the Juvenile Justice Act, and the system, because we have to speak to children in child speak language. Right. So when we talk about taking responsibility for the alleged offense, we have to go through the actual process with the child and give them an understanding what taking responsibility mean. So if for an adult you say, are you pleading guilty or not guilty? An adult will understand in terms of the guilt. Am I guilty? Am I not guilty? Am I innocent of this offense? But for children who have not been in any kind of legal system or legal framework, or are not adults, so to speak, in terms of the law, you'd have to you put it in child speak. Are you taking responsibility for this offence? And you explain what the offence is, and you go into child speak language, and then basically you will get the result in terms of what is required by law.
All right then.
But like you said, if you don't,
if you
I guess
don't,
would continue on. Then if the child doesn't,
well,
accept
if the child does
responsibility.
not accept responsibility, then the matter would go down for trial because the child is not taking responsibility for that offence. And according to the law, the matter would go to trial. So there will be no further questions asked to the child at that point.
All right then. Very interesting. But then again, what situation would allow for a matter to still go to court even after the child accepts responsibility?
When you say that,
in relation to an offense committed by a juvenile. So it said that in most instances, the child do not accept responsibility, then you go to court, right? But sometimes, based on the severity of the offense, even if the child accepts responsibility, right? So maybe under what circumstances you mean that, even if a child accepts responsibility, then you still have to bring the matter in court. Under what circumstances or situation would that happen?
Yes, and so that is a very good question because there are schedules to the offense, right?
Yes.
Just as how a child would come in and we would ask them questions about acceptance of responsibility. There are some offenses that are called Schedule 3 offenses, right, in the Act.
Yes.
And those offenses, then even if the child said, yes, miss, I did it, you still have to go to well, not technically trial, because you wouldn't, some of these matters, like if it's a sexual offense, if it's incest, if it's rape, sexual intercourse.
Oh, yeah, very good. Because my next question was to ask you what is Schedule 3 offenses.
Matters, they will be go up to high court. Depends on the offense.
If there are indictable matters, right? Indictable matters are those matters, like we said, sexual intercourse with a person below the age of 13, below the age of 16, right? Murder.
Yeah, causing serious offenses.
Serious offenses, right? So all these serious offenses, then the matters are indictable, which means that it would go to the high court.
Exactly.
Right? Just like an adult matter, if the person is arraigned at the high court and they said, okay, yes, I am guilty, then the matter does not go to a trial, right? It would just go to the sentencing phase. If the child does not accept responsibility, obviously, then the matter still has to go to trial, right? That doesn't change. The matter would still have to go to trial. The good thing about I think about the situation is for juveniles still, in the sentencing phase of those serious offenses, there are still conditions, right, in which the judge at that time would pass sentence on the child, right? So they still consider, okay, this child was 8, 16, 15 when they committed that offense, because we do have children committing serious offenses, right? But they still take into consideration that aspect of the law that he or she was a child at the time of offense. And if the matter comes to court after the child has attained the age of 18, but the offense was committed at 16, because sometimes, the system, how the system works, right? The matters don't always come up in court in a timely manner, right? But in that case, the court would still pass sentence, given the fact that the person now, maybe 18, 19, 20, was a juvenile at the time. So they're still considered during sentencing. That is still considered.
Yes, we also have to consider the framework of the juvenile court system, because the children come to court, it's a lower level court. So they don't go to, just so adults understand the system as well, they don't go to high court directly when the initial assessment is done. It's a lower level court, it's the magistrate court. But the court, the system was set up for juveniles to rehabilitate and also, for the safety of the child, because it's still a child. Exactly. So, and they haven't had any knowledge of the court system, how the legal framework works. And the judge is a concerned individual. He's looking at the concerns of the child, because the child they're not adults as yet. So from the age of, as I said, 12 to 18, when the child is legally an adult, then you go into the legal framework for an adult and go into the adult system. But it's really not, it's not a soft approach. And people say, it's soft, and the children just getting a tap on the wrist. When you look at the individual cases, right? It's never that simple. You know, the individual cases, when you may hear that, you know, Johnny did something, and give an example, assault a police officer, right? And there's a public uproar, which is understandably so, because officers are there to defend the public, you know. But then when you get Johnny on a one-to-one and see all the issues and the things surrounding it, what do we do? Do we go through the hard punitive approach, or do we take the other approach where we can do the necessary interventions to prevent reoffending and to make Johnny understand that, you know, what you're taking responsibility, but what are the issues surrounding that? You know, so at that point, the intervention is needed. So when the child gets to, you know, 18 plus, he's not directly going straight into the adult system and, you know, maybe eventually prison. You know, so there is a remorse in terms of, you know, taking accountability, the child taking accountability and explaining, you know, what accountability is, and the remorse, all that is taken into account at that stage.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ford, because I don't think I was able to explain it as detailed as you did, because this is one of the concerns, as I said earlier on, that we usually have. And I hear it all the time, and I'm sure you might be hearing the same thing, that, you know, you'll find persons will make those kinds of comments. But I think a lot of times is that because they're ignorant of the process, they do not understand the process, so they make those comments in ignorance. And I'm happy that we're here, and we can use this medium to educate the public so they have a better appreciation of how the system works and how it works to really protect and to help to rehabilitate our young ones, right? I think that those sort of programs need to be expanded, you know, in every way, so a larger number of our community can get a better appreciation, you know, of that. And just because I really want to get more clarity to the community, and just briefly, because we kind of coming down to the end.
Something to that in terms of the type of child as well.
Yes, all that. So, but we can get, but just briefly, if you can, and I'm not really pointing any particular one, so whoever party falls in, you know, you pick it up.
That's what
because yes, good, right. So, we speak about diversion. And because they say, I understand, you understand, but we're speaking to the public that may not understand what it means when you say diversion. You get the kids into a diversion program and so on. So you can briefly explain to the public what you mean by when you speak about a diversion. Right.
It's not always this. I would just want to add at this point, it's not the soft option, and I think that's generally can be the public perception. Go ahead, Ms.
All right. So diversion is basically adopting informal procedures, right? And so, like we said, the whole Juvenile Justice Act is to divert the child away from the formal system. And so diversion is, once the child accepts responsibility, then we look at informal ways in working with the child. And that would be, as Ms. Ford said, on an individual basis, right? So what each child needs might differ based on the case, based on the child, based on the offense committed. So then we have what is called diversion options. And like those options, again, are individual options. So the child might commit an offense, they might commit a house breaking and stealing offense, right? Go in somewhere, steal speakers, steal a cell phone, so forth, right? So one of the options might be for the child to do some restorative, right? Restorative means that it could be community service, right? It could be the parents, based on the age of the child, right? The parents are still responsible. That parent might have to compensate the victim, right? That compensation could be meeting in a case conference like situation, meeting with the victim and the victim or the / complainant and the child and his parents, where the child can apologize for the offense committed, and that goes a long way in the community, right? Because a lot of persons you hear say, okay, miss, I don't want the child to get into trouble because I understand he's a child, he mightn't have the best life, and so they are open to accepting an apology, right? And so sometimes, like Ms. Ford said, it's not a soft approach because persons, they are not there when the matter comes to the court, right? And so we still try to take into consideration the opinion of the victim in the matter, right? And sometimes that victim does not want to proceed in a harsh, I guess, manner, or they might say, okay, you know what, just help the child. I don't want this thing back, but help, at least assist the child. And so from the assessment, we would know, okay, what this child needs. And so the options, the diversion options would have a rehabilitative aspect and I guess a slightly punitive aspect to it, right? So compensation or whatever the case may be. So it depends on the child, but there's various options, but it's on an individual basis, right? So persons, like I said, no community service, they know, okay, so doing an apology, the diversion could be a family time order that the child isn't spending, there isn't enough family time, right? It's the child does lack supervision, right? There isn't a parent in the home. So we have those orders. Or the child might go to a alternative form, which is we have the alternative program, which is run by Legal Aid. And so we partner with a number of stakeholders. There's the ART, which is aggression replacement therapy. And so whatever the child needs, then we find a diversion tailored to that child.
Okay.
Can I just add that
Yes,
we know that children are able to change, right? Adults are able to change, but a child, we are working with in terms of the intervention because we know a child, their brain, how they function, right? They may have made a mistake or committed an error or committed an offense, whether it's minor, serious offenses, but we know that child is still able to change, right? Can turn it around. And that's why there's so many professionals at that point for the child, because remember, it's their whole life ahead of them. So if you do the intervention early, you know, you're more likely to see those changes, you know, rather than later when the child becomes a seasoned criminal. Exactly. You know, so that's part of the purpose of it. And also in the juvenile justice system, we work very closely together, probation officers, right? And we come across a lot of children that have a whole host of issues. A lot of them do have substance abuse issues. There are kind of clear things that you can identify with children. There are triggers, there are symptoms, there are things that you can look at to say, well, you know, this child may have some longer issues or long-term issues or short-term issues, depending on what they're facing. So it could be drug abuse, it could be mental health issues, right? It could be antisocial disorders, conduct disorders that affect the child's behavior, affect their performance at school, affect their relationship with their parents, peer pressure, all these things. Social media, excuse me, is a big one. You know, so when you look at all these different variables and the parent knows there's something that's bothering the child, something that they maybe not be able to manage the child's behavior, you know, because we all know that, you know, as a parent, you say, well, I send in Johnny to school. He has to wake up this time and he's going to school, and you get a report that Johnny's going to school, but he's not going to class. He's sculling class or he's truant. But maybe the parent's not getting that information until after a few weeks or whatever the case may be, because there may be issues with the child and in terms of who he's hanging around with. Peer pressure comes in. So those are all the variables that we have to look at. By the time the child comes to us, in terms of conflict with the law, there's all these variables already at play. You know, maybe the parents may not have identified it, or they have identified it, but having trouble managing it.
Okay.
You know, when Johnny was 4, you know, you could tell him, no, don't do that. Stop that. Don't do it. But when he's 14, 15, you know, and there's all these other pressures, you know, then they say, well, he used to listen and now he's not listening. You know, when I tell him to go to school, I find out he's not going to school. He's hanging out.
Sorry, Miss. I don't mean to cut you.
Just so many
I said I know that the time do not allow us, you know, to do justice to this program, right? In the session. But before I forget, and I don't want to leave without posing this question. One of the requests I get the most from parents is, officer, can you take my child to Bacolet home? I want him to go in Bacolet, or I want her to go in Bacolet home. And, you know, so I'll just call it, maybe you can briefly explain. If there's a path to Bacolet home other than a child actually committing a criminal offense, because sometimes we deal with a lot of children that might be delinquent, but their behavior does not amount to a crime, right? And I know they are. Even yesterday, I'm sorry, taking me home. I said, I don't know if I could, maybe I would, I can't. So maybe
so there's a two-part thing there. The public perception comes into play, because you get someone saying, "Oh my God, what's this place?" and you know what the children and what they do with the children, and then you get the other perception, which is, well, send him to the home. Miss Wood, send him. I warn him and he's not listening, send him to Bacalet, you know, but it's not, as I said, it's not a soft option, it's a last option in most cases. You don't just send children to Bacalet. That's not the purpose of it, right? The purpose is a rehabilitative and it's a treatment center. So you're looking at all the issues that the child has, right, from when the intervention is done when the child is in conflict with the law, going through the court system. And it's kind of a system where the child is processed and the child is also supported through that process in terms of what does the child need? Does he need counseling? Does he need a mentor in the community? Does he need some more attention at school in terms of his educational abilities, you know? So there's all those factors that come into play. But sometimes the child is not able to be supervised in the community. He may not be going to school. He may not be listening to the parents. He may be sleeping out, you know, and not coming home for days. You know, this is a kind of, you know, a more serious scenario, right? It's not an everyday scenario.
So does that mean there isn't a part, or there is? Because I just wanted to.
Say that again.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify
Right,
that
so no, you can't just parent out if they want to help.
I know.
No, right. So basically, what happens is the only the magistrate. There's two ways in which a child can get to back.
Exactly.
There's either the under the legal system, right, under the law, that the magistrate would send would order that a child be sent to Bacalet. Right, or it's if the child is in need of care and protection, right? The child is being neglected, maltreated, and so CPA would come there. CPA, that's Child Protection Agency, right? And so that they would come in there, right? So that's another stakeholder.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I just because I need this is important, right? So care and protection, not delinquent behavior.
No,
that does not amount
there's a
to a
criminal
crime.
side.
So also the criminal side through the court,
that's right.
and the other side is through CPA where a child is a victim or.
You see, as I said, the whole host of problems. You may have a child that's committed an offense in conflict with the law, comes to court, there's an assessment being done, right? But the child, in doing the assessment, you find that there's issues in terms of care and protection. That's why we work together. Right? So all the agencies work together. So child protection would be at court, probation would be at court, education would be at court, education officer, could be truancy officer. We work together more.
So the care and protection is still stemmed out from the initial court.
Yes, because Bacalet is under care and protection.
All right, good. Because the reason why I'm really getting to that, because I understand, but I just want the public to understand, because I get that request, and I'm sure Ms. Mitchell also do almost every time we have a parent and say, officer, I have a child, I don't know what to do with them again, or we can just send them up in back.
So we would still assess the child, but then we would refer the child to care and child protection agency.
But
we work together.
It is important. It's very important for us to establish that, right? That your child just can't be sent. The police can send your child. Probation can send your child.
We don't have the power to do so,
right? Because there's a system in place and we followed that system, right? So we don't have the legal authority to do so. We can recommend, but like Ms. Ford said, it's a sort of last option because we really want the diversion is there to keep the child from offending and to ensure that they have what they need. So
it's a last resort.
So we are almost about to shut now. So any last closing words from Ms. Ford and then Ms. St. John or Ms. St. John or Ms. Ford?
I do have one of the things that I wanted to speak about briefly is that outside of the Juvenile Justice Act, the police especially works with persons in the community, young people in the community, juveniles who might be getting in trouble at school. They're not necessarily committing offenses or something that they might be running away from home. They might be fighting in school. Those sort of things, but you don't want to initially charge them with an offense, right? So the police does, they really do a lot of that frequently, which is sort of a pre-charge, right? So prior to being charged, or maybe the option is there for them to be charged, the police would meet with the same stakeholders because a lot of the interventions are the same, right? But we do try to assist the child and the parents before the matter comes to court, because a lot of matters get mediated by the police, right? The police, I know in St. John's, I know in St. George's, and I'm sure in all other police stations, wherever offenses or children come in conflict with the law, that the police and the probation would try to work in collaboration to ensure that the child doesn't even get to the court system in the first place.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ford.
Yes, well, we work at the probation unit, and the various officers, myself and Ms. St. John. We also work with Ms. Judy Milo, who's the supervisor of the unit, and other probation officers and probation officer assistants we now have in place that assist us with our work in each parish. So the other thing I want to say is we speak about, in colloquial terms, that it takes a village to raise a child. And we want the village to raise our children. We want all the parties, all the multi-agencies, whether education, police, probation, social workers. There's so many professionals out there doing a really great job. We don't always hear about the success stories. We hear about the ones that are more high profile for whatever reason, for delinquency, whatever reason. But there are some successes where these children would have turned a corner in terms of growth, you know, in their mind to recognize, well, this is not working for me. Let me try and change a corner. Okay. But it takes a village to raise our children.
Definitely.
So let's come together as a village and do what we have to do.
You're so right about that. Again, sorry, we have to cut here. Our time is up. But this program this morning has been so informative, and I'm really so happy that we have two well-competent persons here to discuss so much important issues. It has been a great pleasure being on this radio station this morning, and I look forward to continuing our public engagement to educate the public on very important and interesting matters that, you know, on subjects that affects our lives. Next week, please the Lord, we're going to deal with substance abuse and violence among young persons, and I suspect we may have the same person back here again. I'm excited already because, you know, I'm anticipating a very informative session, right? I'll try to set up to have a call-in so maybe persons can voice a view on, you know, on the issue. So again, it's been a great pleasure being here this morning. Thanks much again, Ms. Ford and Ms. St. John. I know that we work a lot with Ms. St. John, you know, and she's always, you know, ready to work with us. And you know, I know Ms. Ford from the past, and so on. Yeah, I know. Right? So we family, and Ms. Mitchell, you know, she may not be on today, but you know, she always been a great support, and you know, just thank you very much for, you know, listening, and I always want to let you know that if you have any problem, any question, any doubt, feel free, you can call Gulf Police Station 444-8224, ask for Corporal Dupree or Miss Mitchell, and we're always happy to assist in any way that you can. So again, thank you.
Based on Melville Street.
All right, and so maybe you can also call probation, and if you want to give them a number, Melville Street, the office, you want to leave a number in case. All right.
Is it 440-6037?
60. So 440-6037. You can call probation. If you have any question or any query, you can call probation, or you can call us at Goa Police Station. That's where our office are located. So again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, and see you next week. Please the Lord.
Thank you for having us.
Colors, aluminum windows, doors, inset screens, and hurricane shutters. Installation services are available for all our manufactured products. Our opening hours are Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. M&N Hardware Limited. Come on in and experience our affordable prices. Or call us 444-6757 or 440-6757 Dusty Highway. Email us at info@mahonhardware.com or mnmdusty@mahonhardware.com. M&N Hardware, foundation to roof. Let's